Go ahead, Coach. We're ready. So we're back here again. It's Wednesday, April
Okay.
Fool's Day.
Yes, it is. Is it every day April Fool's Day?
Well, today definitely is.
Yeah, I convinced the boys that they had to go back to school today. That's the way I started their day off. I said I got an email last night and made them get dressed for school. They were really happy about that.
Okay. I'd like to introduce one of the parents of the Peninsula program, Huntley Morrison. Huntley has been around a little while. He has two young men. They're in the wrestling program. But Huntley he's been around Peninsula and other programs, and he also coaches baseball. Like for you to talk about, what do you like about, say, Peninsula, or what direction you think all these sports programs should be going into with your two young boys?
Well, I mean, just to give you a little background, I graduated from Grant High School in 1987, and that means that I graduated a year behind Coach Hyde Brown, and Hyde and I wrestled together when we were at Grant. I was not a youth wrestler. I was one of those kids that started wrestling my freshman year of high school. And so my first introduction to the program was basically through Hyde, or Coach Hyde. And I think that's where the influence started. Just because, Hyde was such a leader at that point in time, but, he was also like really humble in his own way. And so my experience was just coming over on Tuesdays and Thursdays and getting a little bit of wrestling experience, nothing like what these kids are getting in the youth program. And then after I graduated from high school, I left wrestling. I mean, wrestling was never anything that was in my plans long term. And my wife and I got married, I don't know, we were like 21 or 22, and we didn't have kids for almost 20 years, until we were in our mid-30s, so 15 years. But I knew that I was going to be a baseball coach. I mean, that was the thing. If I ever had kids, I knew that I was going to do that. And so the boys started wrestling, and we started up at West Hills wrestling program. And I think when I first came back to Peninsula, I wasn't really focused on the things that I think are important now. And when you asked me to come talk, Coach, about what brought me to Peninsula, I think it's more important to talk about what's making me stay at Peninsula and being so committed to the process. Because I came to Peninsula with my boys just because they were getting beat, and I wanted them to be good wrestlers, and I wanted them to have wrestling success. As I've stayed at Peninsula and been part of the program, that's become less and less important to me. And my boys are fine. I mean, my boys can show up to tournaments and do pretty well. And, when they're at these lower level tournaments, they do great. But that's not why I'm here. And that's not what I've seen. As the time goes on, I personally have just learned more and more. And I watch how incredible these lessons are for my kids. I think like right now with all this coronavirus stuff, it really comes into play what these kids have learned, because we actually are doing pretty good, as a family. And my boys are actually doing pretty good in terms of the way that they're handling this situation. And it's because those things that you tell them and that what the coaches tell them and that what we reinforce as parents, those are the skills that make them thrive in a situation like this. Okay. And that's why I'm there. It's not for the wrestling. I'm there for the life lessons.
Can you speak more specific? What are some of the lessons or skills that are helping you through this time?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that one of the first things that we did as a family is we set, when they came back and they said, look, your kids aren't going to go back to school. And then people were talking about a possibility of like, that we wouldn't be back this year. We sat down as a family and we talked about what we do at Peninsula. And one of the things that the kids are taught is that they set long-term goals, and then every day they have short-term goals. And so we sat down and we said, all right, what are going to be our goals, long-term to get through this process? And so, for example, the boys both, said that they wanted to be able to finish the year where they met all of their Common Core requirements, at school, that was important, that when they started school again next year, that they wanted to be at grade level. I mean, and they both decided that. I mean, I obviously helped them to go in that direction. They both wanted to stay in shape, and we knew it couldn't be wrestling shape, but just to stay active. So those were the long-term goals, and we wrote those down on a piece of paper. And then we set up like a little schedule every day with like short-term goals as to how they would meet that. And we started that before the boys got out of spring break. But where the skills come in is one of the first things that coach talks about is that, you know, it's a process. And I think that's really important because kids today do have difficulty understanding what that means to follow a process. People want this immediate gratification, and we are a society that's set up with these kids where they get immediate gratification. And when you come to Peninsula, number one, the level of wrestling changes. You know, I mean, in terms of what we do kind of early in the year and then the tournaments we go to, these are really good kids that we end up wrestling against. And you're not going to have success wrestling-wise. I mean, most kids won't. Some will. We have some incredible athletes that come in and do amazing things. But most of these kids have to commit to a process where it's long-term. And coach always talks about, well, you know, the first year we learn how to lose like gentlemen. The second year we learn how to win. And really what he's saying is that this is a long-term process that you have to follow. And the amazing thing about it is that these, like my kids were what, 7 and 5 when they started?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and here's the thing, a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, when they're being taught that at 7 and 5, that becomes their reality. So my boys both look at this and you can like say, look, it might not be until next year that you start to see results from this, like where you really see them. And they're okay with that process, you know, and they're really committed to sticking to that, you know, with it. And so, I mean, when we talk about these long-term goals, the boys, because of their wrestling, are able to do it. You know, coach always says you have to be, and I've said this one ton in my house, coach, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, because it really is uncomfortable right now in a lot of ways. And I just was saying that to the boys today. You know, you got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's the type of thing that emotionally you can see, like when you say stuff like that to them, because they realize that they've done it like in these little increments, like at practice and stuff, it actually, you can see that they get like emotional relief from that. So, I mean, I don't know, it's one of those things where if we could write it down and we could put it in a book and we could organize it, it would be a really long book, because it's just like, I don't know what all the coaches, Coach Haig and Coach Pitt, is every opportunity that there is, they take that opportunity and teach the kids some life lesson. And coach has, you know, 40, 50 years of experience doing it. And I think what's really important for parents to understand is that, look, we don't have any training. We don't have any experience raising kids. I mean, parents think that they know, you know, I mean, if we have our life skills, but we have not had the opportunity to have success and to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes, raising and training and teaching kids. I mean, I just don't have that. I get one opportunity for it. And usually I make the mistake with the older one and then I realize with the younger one. Where I am really fortunate, I don't know, I was just born this way or somehow I got this way, is that I have an open mind. I'm able to trust people, and I'm able to change my worldview. And I think in order to be successful in our program, as a parent, you've got to walk in and be able to do that. Because when you start turning your kids over to these guys and you start realizing, look, coach is doing this because maybe he did it right with some kid before, or maybe he made a mistake with some kid and he learned from it before. You know, these are the things that it's just like, I don't know, I guess it's like a cheat sheet to parenting, because you know, you just get so much as a parent out of that. So,
You know, Huntley, I was listening to you speak and you talk about family. And I think the kids know the difference. They got their biological family, but also when they come to Peninsula, that's also their family.
Yeah, that's a good point, Coach, because, you know, and I've said it before, and you know that's probably, so that really is the most important part about it. And I didn't expect that from myself when I started with Peninsula, is we really are a family, and you have family responsibilities that go with that. But I mean, it starts with the kids. When you watch these kids come in, and they all come in different. I mean, you know, like my kids came in and my younger one would get out with Coach JJ and he'd put him on the middle of the mat and his little lip would quiver, you know, and he'd almost start to cry when he had to start to, it's serious. I mean, and he's a beast now, you know, but I mean, the coach came to me and said, hey, the first thing they got to do is learn a little toughness. And But the amazing thing, so they all come in different. Like they all come in different. The amazing thing to see is when you see some of the kids that maybe have the worst behavior problems. And we got a couple in our program right now that have come through this process. And once you see it and you work, and they're like disruptive and they're wild and they're in trouble in school, you know, and all this stuff that goes on with them. But over time, they become part of the group, and then they become part of the friendships, and then these kids get really, really close. And that's the most important thing. I mean, that's another important thing that coach has done is there is I guess, a culture at Pitt where the kids are expected part of the process and to help each other. And so you see older kids like Jashawn or Dylan, and they're living up to that responsibility, and they'll gently walk over and correct a kid or something like that. So you see the family start with there on the mat. And then, you know, and then as parents, like we always say, or coach always says, or Maria says, is that you get what you put into it. And so we start to work through it. But no, my kids are I mean, there's our family here, and I don't have a lot of family in Portland. So like, it's not, I mean, we have grandparents, but that's about it. But they consider, you know, coach a father figure, Haig a father figure in a good way, you know, different, something that I can't provide. You know, it's that mentorship, and they get that from the other kids too. So, but you see these kids change. I mean, that's the thing. And it's because of the whole family situation that's going on. You see them care about each other at the end, you know, with it.
Hey,
Would
coach.
you say at Peninsula, one of the things that make it work is we have like substitute parents. For kids that don't have parents, we have substitute parents that take on that responsibility when we travel and when we do things, and kids always rise to the occasion.
They do. You weren't there last year, Coach, but when we went up to Chehalis for the freestyle tournament,
Yes.
we have a young man a young boy that's been around in our program for a long, long time, and his dad lives on the East Coast. And at the same time, we brought up a kid that was in 8th grade, a very mature kid in 8th grade. And it was, I mean, we see this a lot, but those two bonded on that trip. And you could see that young one, the attention that he got. And it was just for a weekend, but you could see it was just that he, you know, and he's got a great family. I mean, there's no doubt about it. He's got really important people, but there's just certain things that kids can't get when they have like a single home or maybe parents that are really, really busy. And they get that. They get that from you coaches, but they get that from the kids. And I don't know, there's just, you see that example all the time with it. I mean, and the best part about it is I tell them, I mean, I can tell my boys, that's not a question for me as a dad. You know, you need to go talk to coach about that. That mentorship that they get is just, you can see that it's going to change them in terms of who they are as people down the line. And it's good because I'm not always the greatest person for my kid. I'm really not, you know, and to have that and to be able to pass that on to you is fantastic. I mean, it just makes them tough. That's for sure.
Hey,
Well,
coach.
one of the things that I see is where you've changed is when your kids come off the mat. It's not about winning or losing. It's the output that they put in.
Yeah, coach
not
taught
the
me that.
outcome.
Yeah, coach taught me that. And I tell you, so I coach Little League Baseball, man. And it's funny because people think that I'm a genius when it comes to stuff. But I just listen to coach and then I'm like, oh, I'm going to say that. But one of the things that we talk about, and this has changed, is we just talk about effort and focus. And that's the only thing that, and coach taught me that. Just talk about effort and focus with them. And that's the only thing that I ever, you know, I guess judge my kids based upon is, and even when they don't have focus and effort now, like I've grown to the point where I'm like, well, you need to go talk to coach about your focus and effort. But yeah, I've changed as a parent. I was one of those ones. So coach asked me, I don't know, after a couple of years of watching me be who I was, and I wasn't bad, but you could just see that I'm super competitive, and they've got a mother that's 100 times competitive than me. You know, coach actually gently, you know, said that I think the best thing for your kids is for you to really step back. And I went from being hyper, like, I guess, focused on them at practice and what they're doing and the moves they're doing and stuff like that to not even care. I mean, now I show up at like 7:25 to pick them up. And I started reffing. That was the other thing, is coach started reffing. And that's when things got good for me. When I stepped back and I stopped focusing, and I mean, this is the year, I think this year for wrestling season, I really walked into tournaments not caring. Because what was important was I saw their growth, and I saw that they were working hard, and I saw that they were focused. And my 12-year-old, I know coach, he's going to wrestle high school. He makes me take him to practice. I don't ask him to go to practice. And if I don't take him to practice, he will be disappointed. His wrestling is all about him and me supporting him. And, you know, if they don't get to that point, then I don't think that they're going to be really strongly committed to wrestling anyways. And I think the only reason my boys got to that point, coach, is because you guided me and helped me get them there. I mean, when they're little, you got to push them and go to practice. No, you're not going to play video games. But what you want is the kid that, I mean, Silas doesn't want to go to miss practice because he's afraid that his, you know, wrestling partners at practice are going to get better than him. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
Do your kids understand PAT? PAT, the acronyms of pain, agony, and torture.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I do. I think they do. But I don't think, because they've done this for so long, that, I mean, so we'll take a kid every once in a while. We'll be like, oh, you'll be a good wrestler. Come to Pitt with us. And you watch a kid like that go through his first practice. And this surprises me. By the warm-up, you can tell that that kid mentally, in terms of like what they're physically going through, it's hard for them. My boys, I mean, you know, high school, Silas occasionally at those high school practices, you'll look at him and he's, you know, pretty worn out. But I just don't think that there's anything that happens at Peninsula where they think it's torture or agony. I think they've just gotten there where that's their normal.
Well, that is right. It's your attitude that will determine your altitude.
Yeah, and they like that. I mean, that's the other thing. We're so coddled in society, and these boys expect, no, you know what? I take that back. I'm going to do push-ups when I'm done. These kids need, you know, they intuitively know that you can only feel good about yourself when you've actually completed something that was hard to complete and you had to put a lot of work into it. They know it. And that was the thing. Before I came to Pitt, I'm an 80s kid. I'm not like one of these millennial kid that was raised the way some of these people have been raised. I was really kind of disgusted by the gifts that were given to my kids and the accolades that they were given to. You know, and I knew, you say this, coach, but I always said this too. I never told my kids good job when they didn't do a good job, because then I'd become a liar, right? They wouldn't trust me. I want my kids to trust me. So I would say things like better, you know, you need to put good effort in. But before they got to Peninsula, even at some of their other wrestling programs, they'd be told good job when it wasn't a good job. And they know that. And what these children, I'm going to do 2 sets of push-ups now. What these kids need is they need to be able to have this process where they can feel good about themselves. And that's where, you know, that's where our kids are different. I mean, when you look at our kids compared to other kids, they're different. They don't feel good when they haven't earned it, but they feel really, really good when they've earned it. And they don't mind failing too. I mean, that's the other thing. It's just, failure's okay. I mean, these kids have learned to fail and to walk through that process.
And it definitely is a process. You can't skip it.
It comes quick for some and longer for some, but I'm going to tell you, the kids that show up, it's about a year. I mean, that's really, you always say about a year. It's about a year. You have some kids that thrive right away, but you have some kids that have to struggle for a year with it. And my boys had to struggle with it, you know, for a year. But they're kids. And that's the other thing about it that people don't understand, is going to practice at Peninsula is playtime for them. You know, I mean, it really is. I mean, they've learned to have fun working hard. And it's not like playtime recess. They've learned to have fun working through a hard process. My boys have fun doing it.
You know, the only thing about life, you only get it when you get it. And one of the things we want to do is we want to rush it. But you can't rush it. You only get it when you get it.
Yeah, you hit on a conversation that we had recently, is the sayings and the phrases that we go over and over again. So one of the highlights for me this year is I was watching Coach Haig and Coach Pitt coach a high school practice. And there was a good 20 minutes where they were out on the mat talking to the kids together, and they were finishing each other's sentences. And I don't know, I thought it was amazing. But what it dawned on me was that we keep repeating these things to these kids, all these lessons, and they're not going to hear it right away. And a kid may hear it one day, or it may take him 5 years to hear it, you know, or whatever it is. But eventually they hear it. And this year you saw that. I saw that in the high school room, you know, with some of these kids, like really, like you could just see, like it dawned on it. And the thing is they believe this stuff. I mean, that's becomes who they are, you know, when like my boys are really motivated by the fact that, you know, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. They say that all the time, you know, with it. And they use that to comfort themselves, you know, with the harder times. But there's so many lessons, and they don't have them all. I don't have them all. I'll sit and hear something. I'm like, well, you said it 100 times, but I finally know what that means now. And I can tell you with what's happening now, like, I'm worried about my business. I'm worried about what we're going to do, you know, what it's going to be like. But I'm actually emotionally okay, because I've actually told myself in my head, you know what, when opportunity knocks, I just have to be ready. You know, if I work hard, whatever comes, whatever challenges I have, if I'm willing to work hard, I'm willing to step up, and I'm willing to walk through my fear. I mean, because Coach, you say everything we want is on the other side of fear, right? All those things that you've been saying, I've been telling myself. And I don't know what's going to happen, you know, with my stuff, but I know that with the skills that I'm going to be prepared. And in some ways, I'm a little bit excited. I can see one of them back there behind me. I'm a little bit excited because, you know, these are skills that give me an advantage over other people, you know, and I've used some of my wrestling skills to have success in my life. You know, I told Coach that, and I'm not bragging when I say this, and I hate talking about this, but I told Coach that when you go to law school, one of the most important things that you do is that you form a study group. And this is a group of people that you spend 3 years with, and I'm talking 30, 40 hours, and you rely upon them, because you can't get through law school successfully by yourself. You have to have a study group. You share notes, you take outlines, you do all sorts of stuff. I formed a study group just with people that like I sit in class and I talk to. One of them I knew because I played football with him at Lewis and Clark. But the other two I didn't really know. And when we all got in that study group, 3 out of the 4 were wrestlers. We didn't know that. I mean, you know, we were a study group that was fun. I mean, we worked hard, but we would stay, you know, and play. I mean, we didn't have conflict. And I don't think that was by accident. I think that we all recognized that, you know, in each other, and saw that and chose each other, you know, for that reason. But it goes back to just, I think I'm ready for this. And in some ways I'm kind of excited, because I think there will be opportunities for us out there. You know, life will be different probably, but we'll make it better than what it was before.
We definitely will. Hey, Coach Dusty.
Yeah.
He can talk, can he?
A little bit.
Can you tell that he's a lawyer? Yes, he.
Yes.
Yes. You know,
Sorry.
this is just one of the parents, and this is just, once again, his perception of what he gets out of this for his kids, and how it helps them in their everyday life in school and what have you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm appreciative of it. I tell you, I guess one of the things that I would tell everybody is that, and I say this to my kids all the time, there's very few people in this world that will show up every day and every night to help people. And Coach High, Coach Pittman, Coach Michael, the time and the commitment they get. If my kids get anything out of life whatsoever, is to see people that are willing to do that to help others. Coach and I had a conversation, and this one I've been thinking about for a while, was where we were talking about defining success and what it means to be successful. And when I talk about success with my boys, I always mention that, helping other people, being dedicated to, you know, to making this a world a better place. That's a rarity. And just to have your kids even stand next to somebody in a room like that. And all coaches are that way, you know. I mean, I get that every coach gives time that way. but to have your kids experience that, how can that not make them better? Their view on life and what it means to be a good person or to be a successful person is definitely influenced by that. And if we had every kid experience that, we'd probably in the long run end up with a better world, no matter what they did, whether it's coaching wrestling or, you know, working in conservation or doing something. My boys understand that that's an important part of life.
Good, good. Thank you. Well, we've taken up a half an hour, buddy.
Oh,
All right,
that's
Huntley.
neat.
And I really appreciate it. Tell the kids I want them all to write me a letter.
Okay.
Not type me a letter, but write me a letter.
All right. I got one that owes you one then.
Okay.
All right.
And then the email will be on our Facebook, and they can send it to me. And I just want a collection of all these letters just during these trying times. And these are the best of times. Depends on how we look at ourselves. And once again, we have to make wherever we are a judgment-free zone for these young people, because they do have a lot of questions, and we might not have all the answers, but they have to have a voice to ask those questions, and we want them to have a voice. Thank you. Dusty, you want to say anything?
No, thank you, Huntley, and we'll get this posted today, and thank you for your time.
All right. Thanks, you guys. Take care.
Yeah, do the same now. Have a nice day.